Welcome to the Become the Best You podcast, where we discuss everything personal development and listen to real life relatable stories from individuals that are on a mission to become their best self. Dan, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Look forward to this.
Oh, good. I've been excited to get involved and jump on this podcast. What I want to do, Dan, I'd love to start with your journey, right? And I'd love to take it back to sort of like what got you into high performance. Now, you don't have to go all the way back since you started with, but what is the main thing that pushed you towards high performance and being a performance coach?
There's been different levels and tiers to it, Jack, if I'm honest. So I've been high performance coach for 20 years, but it's really tightened up over the past decade. So when I say tightened up, 20 years ago, it was personal trainer at Virgin Active. That's how it all started. An introvert who couldn't hold a conversation with someone. And I had to go through this growth and development of how to communicate, how to speak, how to get the best out of people. And looking back, and this is a rarity, I rarely do look back, so these conversations are going to be quite good and powerful for me as well, that you got to go through this process of growth and development. But in actual high performance, that wasn't high performance. That was just my growth phase. And the foundations for where we're at now, 10 years or so, it's been, highest level of pro sport, and been so many lessons throughout that process. So it's been a process. Started as a personal trainer, got qualified, became an S&C coach, went down a path of working with professional athletes, primarily boxers, but also some Premier League footballers, NFL Super Bowl winners, and some racing car drivers as well. So I've been really dialed in for the last 10 or so years.
You've been about, right? So you're taking it back to that personal training phase, because I've done personal training. Yeah. You said that you were shy and a bit of an introvert, right? Yeah. Do you feel like that enabled you to communicate with people better?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I literally could not converse. I remember it now. Like, one of the clients I had, I know you've done the NLP thing, was a guy, Darren Laverty. This is 20 years ago, by the way, Virgin Active Stains. And he was an NLP practitioner, and he first opened my eyes up to this art of communication and getting the best out of people and taking them on a journey. And he was paying me for my time, 3 or 4 sessions a week. And this was over a 2 or 3 year period. But it was completely the other way around. In terms of who was getting the value. He was literally coaching me. And I think he took an enjoyment out of it. This is, I was a fresh-faced 18-year-old at the time, right? Or probably even younger. So that was a really powerful, looking back, moment for me to say, okay, now I've got to go on this growth phase and development, and that starts with communication.
Mate, that personal training done exactly the same for me. It was like when I used to go out and drinking, I was very confident, but without that, I weren't. So when I got into personal training, it's like you and someone locked in a room for an hour. You have to communicate, you have to think, and that really built my confidence outside of that studio, just being able to be in people's company, strangers more than anything, can talk to them over and over again.
And how to fill awkward silences and get the best out of someone. It's not just like, oh, how's the weather? And it probably was that for me 20 years ago, to be honest. But you grow and build, and now, with the likes of Conor Ben and co, just got back from the training camp, I feel I am. Communication is probably the best thing that I can bring to the table.
Love that. After personal training, you said you dived in, you just showed some of your amazing accomplishments there, right? What was the breakthrough for you that went from personal training to like top tier, working with some higher level athletes?
So I'd done the reps in terms of, I was in the Virgin Active space for a while, got personal trainer of the year out of 2,500 people nationwide, kind of was always
personal trainer of the year,
yeah, 3 times out of, I think 3 times out of 4 years, I think it was, actually got awards from like James Corden, I think it was, Vernon Kay. So I was always trying to be the best in my current environment and current situation. I would never just go around in circles and just settle for, okay, that's enough. No, I'd always try and excel. And at that point, and this is called many moons ago now, Jack, I'll probably get the years wrong, it's like 2009, they wanted the best trainers in the UK to open Virgin Active Twickenham. So I lived in and around that area. I was born in Hammersmith, and that was in the home of English rugby. So it was an incredible gym, and we had lots of exposure to the England rugby boys. They had their own gym and their own performance team, but they would occasionally come in. And that's when there was a bit of a shift from my end. I'd done the personal training thing for a long time at that point and hit the summit of the mountain, so to speak, working in that sector. And then I branched out and started my own business, and that gave me a bit more of exposure to the athlete side of things. And just prior to starting the own business, actually, I met George Groves. In the time prior to that, I'd worked for probably 9 to 12 months with some young amateur fighters, British champions, like GB individuals, like top tier amateurs. And bearing in mind, Jack, this is at a time, we're talking now, probably 15 years ago, right? 14 years ago. The S&C physical preparation was not really a thing. it was always just train harder, just smash all the time. And there's been a real transition over the past 15 or so years. From now, everyone has to have an S&C coach. Everyone buys into physical preparation. Everyone monitors and tracks their nutrition and looks at the data. That was not a thing. It was very militant army style back in the day. So I did the thing with the young amateurs, got some very quick wins very early on. They made me look very good, because if we start looking at training load management, which I know we talk about a lot, and start pulling back a little bit to then move forwards in a bigger picture thought process, then we get some big wins, and they're like, wow, I feel incredible. Yeah, because you're recovering optimally. So I did all of that, got some wins with them, and then got my big break. Got my break with George Groves. George was someone, so I'd been in boxing for a while prior to that, and I knew who George was. George was an incredible fighter. He was on the cusp of potential world level. He'd already been British champion. He'd already fought James DeGale, and I got a break with him. He was looking for a new S&C coach. Engaged with George, did some work with him, and then we just went on this incredible journey together for the next however many years. And that, for me, taught me so much, Jack, in terms of the highs, but also lots of lows. George got knocked out in front of 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium. That was the lowest point for him, for me, for everyone around him. Of course. And you learn a lot from those moments.
Yeah, I was going to say two things there. That relentless mindset that you had to be the number one personal trainer, to take it to that next level. Where did that come from?
It's a good question. And someone asked me this on a podcast a while ago, and it really enabled me to unpack and start thinking back. I'm very, as you know, I'm very outcome oriented. I'm very just focused forwards. I always want to get better every day. In fact, my biggest fear is staying the same. I'm always trying to have that growth mindset and have great conversations like this. But for me, what I said to him, he really made me unpack this, is I did boxing for a long period of time. I used to travel quite a long way to go and do so. I then played semi-pro at Harrow and Hillingdon Borough, and I remember I got a bus from where I lived in Hampton all the way to Harrow or Hillingdon. Like this, it probably took 2.5 hours. I get a bus to Heathrow Airport, then I'd go again another bus, and it's like, actually, maybe these little things I did start shaping me now. And I've just kept chipping away and working on it on a daily basis. And that's what I would say, Jack, is this hasn't been just, I've been doing it for 6 months. Like every single day, I'll listen to podcasts, I'll read books, I'll listen to Audible, I have good conversations. I'm just on this quest to become better each day. And if I don't know the answers, I'll try and find it.
Yeah, for sure. See you being as relentless with yourself. Do you feel like that enhances who you are as a coach? Like your attitude, your mindset, you're willing to be the best. Does that also help you be a coach, and people want to be around that because that's the way that you are?
I think it's a huge part of my identity. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. Like, my standards are so high, and some won't get it, but others will. And I'm not going to apologise about having high standards. You either rise or fall to the level of preparation. If my standards are so high, and then I start lowering those standards, well, that's my new standard. Most recently in the training camp with Conor, like, certain people's standards weren't high enough, in my opinion, so we pulled them up. And we had awkward conversations to do so. So, yeah, I do live and breathe it. And I try, and even in the training camp, try and do the runs with him, try and lead from the front. But that's not fake. It's not calculated. It's just who I am. So, yeah, I expect a lot from those around me. And I believe that, I hopefully give off that energy.
I would say that's one of the things that helps me as well, is the fact that people work with you because they know and that's one of the reasons why I signed up to you, and I've signed up with my other high performance coaches. I like to look at someone and say, is this person leading from the front? Like, because I want to be around someone that is actually out there every single day doing themselves. I don't want to work with someone, because I've worked with a coach in the past, and we was doing, he was telling me to be disciplined, but then on the weekend he was himself. Like, he used to do bodybuilding and stuff like that, but then on the weekend he was doing loads of drinking, drugs and all that, and then checking me in and sort of like giving me a bollock, and I was kind of like, I know you're telling me, but I'm not really, like, you're not living it, so it's kind of hard taking that advice. Like, when I get advice from you or the other coaches that I've had, because I know that they're out there getting it themselves, and I've got a level of respect for what they've done and what they've achieved, I'm then best gonna listen.
Yeah, I think you have to, in my opinion, because again, if you're working at that higher level, it gives what you're saying substance, and otherwise your take on the other guy may have been, hey, have a look in the mirror, otherwise your words don't carry meaning.
And so a lot of people have past success, and I think that they carry that past success, they still feel like they can be that person that they was, but they can't, you know what I mean? And that was one of the things, the past success I bought into, but he wasn't living and breathing it. So it was like, no, this is not going to work for me, because I want someone that's standards are like, that are like that. The other thing that you touched on there is about what we've dived into a few times, is like pulling back. What is why do people struggle to pull back? And even though we know it's so beneficial to do so.
Yeah, you used the words high performance earlier, and as any high performer, would attest to, they always want to push. They always want to get better. In fact, I've just said it myself, growth mindset. We want to get better every single day. My biggest fear is staying the same. So with that, there's a cost. The other side of that coin is pushing too hard and not knowing when to pull back and being a bigger picture, a macro level thinker. So if we look at the micro and the macro is the bigger picture, the longer term. What is the outcome and how are we working towards that specific goal? The micro is where are my feet now, and I'm just focusing on this single entity, but I'm not then taking any thought into what therefore occurs after this single entity. And that single entity, for context, might be a savage workout. I'm gonna absolutely crush it. German volume training, expose myself to all this volume, get under that bar, but then for the next 2 or 3 days, I'm hobbling around and I can't train.
Yeah.
Well, that's being a micro level thinker. So knowing when to push and when to pull is vitally important. We, as you know, Jack, have a number of things we look at, whether it's Whoop, whether it's our traffic light system. Not all days are created equal. Like a red on our traffic light system is that really tough session. And listen, we got to work hard. You know that. You've just done the 100-mile ultra, right? That is serious hard work. And we've got to both mentally, physically prepare you for those moments and those outcomes. But in the same breath, if you went red every single day, we know you'd break down. In fact, you joined our program with an overload issue through the Achilles, right? Couldn't run.
I was doing red. Do you know what my mindset was? This though, like I had to do red every single day. Otherwise, I wasn't a top performer. Yeah. I wasn't mentally strong. I wasn't mentally capable because like my form of exercise used to be sort of punishment. Yeah. Like I used to look at my runs as punishment. If I'm not going out there and just like giving it everything that I've got every single session, I'm not up to a high standard. I'm not mentally strong. I'm not a fucking man, essentially. And I had to work on a lot of that myself because I was getting injured. I was not being able to hold up that standard all the time. I was burning out, and that's obviously one of the reasons that I started working with you, because I was like, mate, I've been injured for 8 months. I was actually injured and telling myself that you can overcome the injury by just pushing on.
It's crazy, isn't it? But that's not just you, Jan. That is a trait of a high performer, and it's a trait of a high performer. But then you get to a level of saying, actually, if I am a high performer, I probably need to source experts in their respective area to enable me to reach my goals, right? You can go Goggins to a certain level, but then to go to that top optimal level to really optimize your performance, we obviously have to manage training loads. And I think that's key, working in a sport like boxing, which is such a high octane sport where you don't have 10 other teammates backing you up if you have a bad day at the office. You are quite literally on your ass, that you have to know when to push and when to pull. One of my athletes, or former athletes now, he's retired, John Ryder, he had an incredible quote, and it was old school values versus modern methods. So it's old school values, the values of boxing and old school, brilliant, absolutely. They're proper men. But it's got to be modern methods now, because if it's just old school methods and old school values, like we've spoken about, you're going to break down. So we bring new school data, research, science, and then have that kind of hardship of doing the work, merge them together to then have an optimal strategy to reach whatever goals you have.
What do you think separates like the top, you've worked with so many people, the top athletes to the ones that do okay? Like a couple of distinguishing traits. Because that leads into me also I wanted to ask is like, do you also have some people that are not willing to take advice on because they are high performers, and obviously with a high performer sometimes you think, I know best.
To your last point, I'll come to a couple of traits in a second. To your last point, yes, absolutely. Like they don't know what they don't know, and they may have actually got to a level and grinded it out, like, as I said earlier, gone full David Goggins to get to a level and done pretty well. But that doesn't mean they're completely optimized. And what got you to X level may not get you to the next level. So if you are truly trying to optimize your performance and reach the summit of the mountain, you have to have a best-in-class support team to enable you to do so. And we've done that recently with Conor. Like, he just focuses on the training and the boxing. We do everything else. And that's, for me, the way it should be. So he doesn't lose any amount of thought process or energy to something that he doesn't need to be thinking about. And to your point, I've got 3 key traits of high performers, and one is resilience, another is single-minded focus, and another is being relentless. So I'll start with resilience, Jack, is we know it's not a linear path. You know that doing the 100-mile ultra, right? There were so many humps in the road along that journey. But for me, champions are the ones who overcome those humps, and others just succumb to it. They hit a hump in the road, they fall back into their environment, and they never really achieve. So resilience and being resilient to any setback along the way is vitally important to any high performer at the highest level of pro sport or in business. Single-minded focus is important as well. Jimmy Iovine talks about this in Defiant Ones. He says, be like a racehorse. The reason racehorses wear blinkers is so they don't miss a step. They don't care about what's going on left and right. They don't care about the naysayers. They don't care about the noise. And there's a lot of noise. Imagine a pro athlete, Conor, 2 million plus followers. There's a lot of negativity. If he starts, playing to their tune and start listening to this, it can start impacting his day to day. So we have to try and block out that noise. And as Jimmy says, be like a racehorse, forget what's going on left or right. The reason they wear blinkers is so they don't miss a step. So being single-minded in where you're going is super, super important. You've obviously got to know where you're going as well before you do that, but being single-minded is key. And then just being relentless. So when you have clarity of the goal, what the outcome looks like, again, in sport, boxing, it's pretty clear. You have your fight date, April the 26th, just gone, Tottenham Stadium. We reverse engineer the process. We build the systems. We put the team in place. We focus on different training blocks at certain times, and we know exactly where we're going. So we are relentless towards that specific goal. A little bit harder in other domains, but again, for you, 100-mile ultra, you had the date, we reverse engineered the process, we put the steps in place, we had a taper phase pre-event, you had your fueling strategy, so it was very outcome orientated, and then you just focus on the process, you focus on the day-to-day. What can I do right now, and how can I win the day to get me closer to the goal? And so yeah, I'd say they are my 3 key traits: being relentless, single-minded focus, and showing resilience. For me, resilience is really, really key.
Do you feel like some of the people focus too much on the end goal rather than that process of doing what needs to be done?
100%. The building the wall analogy is a good one on this. It's like the goal is to build the wall, but you don't ever think about building the wall thereafter. That's the goal. That's the outcome. You just focus on laying brick by brick by brick. Before you know it, you've reached the outcome. So I think getting crystal clear with goals is important. I think having that outcome is important. Otherwise, you're kind of just going around in circles. One of my favorite quotes is, if one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. You're just treading water. So getting the goal first, definitely. Reverse engineering, and then, okay, now that goal might be in 12 weeks' time. If I start focusing on that outcome, it's too far away. It almost seems unattainable. So what do I do right now? Maybe I'll break that down into blocks. Maybe I'll break that down into a 30-day accelerator strategy. What can I focus on over the next 30 days? What does success look like? Maybe I'll then go a step further and say, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? How can we coined a term, #WTD, one of my football players, a Premier League player, he was coming back from injury. So I'm not focusing on, and it was a hip issue. I think the medical team at the time said 10 to 12 weeks he'd be out. If I start focusing on, I'll say it was Dominic Calvert-Lewin, England and Everton at the time, if I start focusing on when he crosses that white line again and starts scoring goals, he's like, it feels so far away, it feels unattainable. It becomes demoralising. So then we focused on, okay, what are the blocks that we have? We had like a 4-week block with him. I think phase 1 or week 1 was he was just doing soft tissue work with James Davis, an incredible practitioner. And then if he got through that and James signed it off, he'd be back in the gym with me doing some, pretty basic kind of isometric work and just to build a bit of tissue tolerance and capacity, starting to restore normative range of motion. If he ticked that box, we'd be on the grass with no ball, but we'd be doing some linear work, providing he ticked that box. If he ticked that box, we then have the ball at feet. So that's our 4-week strategy. You can see we broke that down as a week-by-week basis, not 12 weeks, not playing again and scoring goals. And it was like, I've got clarity. So I know if I execute every single day, and then we broke that down to what does winning the day actually look like? Are you hydrating? Are you having your electrolytes? Are you fueling adequately? Are you getting your sleep right? Are we tracking everything on Whoop? Many more metrics. And then that's all he had to focus on. So yeah, I do believe in setting the outcome, but I, to your point, absolutely agree with process-led goals for sure.
I said this the other day. It's like, for me, the goal is the aiming point. I used to focus so much on the goal, and I just wanted the goal because it was the accomplishment. I thought that's what's going to make me feel the way that I want to feel. But I believe that the goal is an aiming point, but then they actually crave who they can become along the way. Like, people want to achieve the big goal because they want to be disciplined, consistent, resilient, confident, whatever it may be. But realistically, that's all gained, and them traits are developed through getting to where you want to go. But a lot of people half-ass that process and get to the end and either don't achieve the goal or don't achieve the goal to the level that they want. And I think a marathon's a perfect example. Like, when I spoke to a couple of people just doing a marathon, they're like, they said on their plan, they're not training. The Wednesday was a 10, but because on the Saturday they're doing a 15 or a 20, they're like, there's no point me doing the 10 on the Wednesday because on the weekend I'm going to do 20. And I'm like, it just don't work like that. It don't work like that. Whether it's hard or it's fucking easy, you do every single fucking thing. So on the day, like with 100 mile, execute along the whole training process, whether you want to do it or not. And then on the day, I actually felt confident at the start line because I physically couldn't have done enough. today. Like I'm here. There's nothing I could have changed. Like, so I'm ready to go.
Brilliant. And as I said earlier, you either rise or fall to the level of your preparation. How rewarding is that to know that when that first gun or if you cross the white line goes, you know you've done absolutely everything in your power to achieve that goal. Because I tell you now, there would have been a lot of self-doubt doing your 100-miler.
Yeah, for sure.
Same thing with a boxer, right? Conor's just gone into that ring, stepping up 2 weight classes, being the underdog. Everyone said when that fight got announced it was a mismatch. Then they saw the methods and the relentlessness of your training. Like, oh, maybe he could do something here. We truly believed he could win the fight, and it was a very, very close fight. Super proud of his performance. But when that first bell went, he knew he gave everything. He gave everything. We even coined a term. I'll never forget this, Jack. It was one of the training sessions, and his training management, we nailed every detail throughout camp. But he was a little bit flatter on this day, and he stood on the ring rope. I said, "You're right." Said, yeah. And I could just tell he didn't have the same, bite and energy. And I said, "Con, we don't do bad sessions. No bad session." He just went, his eyes lit up and went, "Whoa, I needed that, man. Yeah, bro. No bad sessions, no bad sessions." And we coined the term. So at any time I felt like his level was a little bit lower, I'd say it. I'd drill it in with him. And it would light him up. And then throughout camp, in the changing room, I said, "Con, we haven't had any bad sessions this camp. You've done everything you can to get your arm raised." So then knowing whether you get your arm raised or not, you gave absolutely everything in that moment. You can hold your head high.
I was going to say, even though obviously the result didn't get away, but he felt like he gave it everything that he possibly could have done and done phenomenally. Like, the result you want, right? Of course, the result didn't go the way. Is he still proud of the accomplishment and because everything was given?
Yeah, I think we all are. But at the end of the day, we're winners. And
of course,
we prepared meticulously. We all gave sacrifice, no one more so than Conor, but we all, gave a lot there and all locked ourselves away in training camp. And we did that to get his arm raised. And we failed to reach that outcome, going back to the outcome thought process. So I'd be lying if I said we weren't disappointed that we never got that. And look, very close fight. Could have gone either way. Probably say, yeah, Eubank probably did nick it. And, kudos to him. He was probably better than I personally thought. He gave a lot, but both fighters dug deep. And it's an interesting one because I've had defeats, defeats at the highest level of pro sport. Like real defeats at the highest level of pro sport. And I've wanted to bury my head in the sand and not talk to anyone. This didn't feel like that, Jack. So it didn't feel like a full defeat because he achieved so much.
That's what I'm saying, because everything was...
Yeah, everything was given. So to your point, we prepare to win. We give everything to win. Winning really is everything. But we can hold our heads high, and goes back to the book of John Kavanagh, Win or Learn. Lots of lessons were learned, but preparation was meticulous for this fight, and we came up short. But we can hold our head high and be proud of Conor's efforts.
For sure. Not even just on that example, but you probably had loads of failures yourself. How do you turn yourself back from something like that to say, right, because I've had fucking loads with every single thing that I've done. It's not been a linear path. It's been a down, and I just know it's a lesson. Let's go again. How do you deal with your own, feedback, failure, or however you like to term it?
Going back to my 3 key traits of a high performer, resilience and being able to overcome setbacks is vitally important. So I think it's having the awareness piece to know that it's not a linear path is step number 1. And knowing that if you are chasing perfection, you're ultimately going to end in failure. Right? I know we spoke offline about that, right? Is the perfectionist mentality and mindset, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's being able to reframe as to when you don't hit perfection to say, I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I do set pretty clear goals. I have, lofty goals in terms of the impact I want to create, financial targets, where I want to live my life. And I'm trying to now curate the life that I want, being in Dubai for, I think, 18, 19 months now. And I'm also very aware that not all meetings are going to get over the line. Not all deals are going to get closed, and it's not always going to go my way. I just brush myself off and move on to the next one. I don't dwell on the negative. And, I run a mastermind and mentorship, and we talk about this. We actually spoke about this on Friday, is that I literally, if I didn't get that deal, I'd reflect for a moment, a brief moment, to say, okay, what could I have done better? Did I bring my best self to that occasion? I do pride myself on that, Jack. And if it didn't go my way, was I communicating the message enough? Did I showcase the value enough? Did I close the gap enough in terms of the individuals to perceive the value of what I was trying to get them involved with? Okay, maybe I could have improved on X and Y. And that reflective piece that I think is really important is not just to say, I'm just going to now move on to the next thing. It's reflecting for a brief moment, but like a cloud, that just passes very quickly. We did this with a footballer again, another striker I won't mention, and we were both reading at the time Matthew Syed's Black Box Thinking, I think it's called. Don't read it. I'm not a fan. We both got to about 75 pages in, and we, funnily enough, messaged each other. I said, "How are you getting on with that book?" He said, "Yeah, it's gone a bit weird." He started to talk about plane crashes, black box, and I was like, yeah, "I'm traveling in a week's time. I don't need that right now." But anyway, to the point, I coined the term. Put your thoughts in a black box after 24 hours. You're allowed to sit with it. We had a 24-hour rule. You're allowed to sit with it for 24 hours. But thereafter, we don't think about that. So for context, this might be through one-on-one in the Premier League, 60,000 people in a stadium, and he goes and puts it wide. He goes and hits the post. The goalkeeper makes a save. In that moment, you should be scoring, but you're not always going to score. Again, going back to perfectionist mentality, we've got to be appreciative. Yes, we prepare to score. We do all the reps, but it's not going to go that way every single time. So how do you reframe? In that moment, the reframe has to be immediate because you might get another chance 2 minutes later. But thereafter, when the final whistle goes, we have a 24-hour rule, and then we put those thoughts in the black box. How did I perform? What could I have done better? Why didn't it go my way? Why didn't I hit the back of the net? Okay, I reflect, we review, we plan, but it goes in the black box and we move forwards. Otherwise, if you're allowing those negative thoughts to carry and stay with you, they'll start impacting your day-to-day.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a few things that I used to in the past. It's very similar. In the past, well, one, I don't always think I was giving it my best, but even when I was giving it my best and it didn't go my way, I would like beat myself up for fucking days on it. You could have done that. You should have done that. You should have done that. But at the moment, it was the best decision that I come up with. It's only when you look back in hindsight, you're like, should have done that, should have done that, should have done that. That's why the reflective piece is, but instead of beating yourself up in that moment, because it was the best choice you made, the best action that you done, you look back on it and say, what could have been better? But in the past, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't getting the result, then beating myself up for it. And then like, well, I'm just going to try again. But there was no reflection. There was no lesson. It was just like, you're basically an idiot. But then one thing that helps me is like making sure I'm doing my best. And if I'm doing my best and it don't go my way, then even it's not softer on yourself, but you don't have to be as hard on yourself. If you know, did I give it my best? Yes. How can I learn from this? Rather than you're this, you're that, that, and not learning from it. Or beating yourself up and learning from it. It depends if you feel like you're giving it your best or not.
And it's the negative self-talk that comes with that. If you're just chipping away and giving all this negativity, that's going to shape your day-to-day thereafter. Whereas, you can reflect on it, give yourself a little bit of negativity in that moment if you so wish, saying, yeah, do you know what? I only had 5 hours sleep last night, or I went for that dinner and it was later than I thought, and I turned up there and I wasn't, in the room, so to speak. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Little things like that, fine. But then you've got to remove the negativity and just kind of champion yourself again.
Because otherwise you end up dwelling on it for 3 days, and then that 3 days could have been best spent progressing or pushing forward or doing even better. I'd love to take back onto the training camp, right, and just some of the things that you dived in and you've done to get to that level of high performance. What are some key moments that stood out for you during that came in training camp?
Prior to camp, Jack, I said that we have to have comprehensive data. We have to go through our testing, and you've been to the lab a few times as well. Everything we do is data-led, and I said to Con, even when I was in Dubai, I said, look, we can't start camp unless you get yourself to my vital metrics in Bank. And geographically, it wasn't far. He lives in Essex, it's in Bank, he can get there. But, getting a high-octane athlete with lots of people vying for his attention in that moment to somewhere when you're not there is a challenge. But I was adamant. I said, Conor, you've got to do this because of a number of reasons. So he did go. We did all the testing, the DEXA scans, the RMRs, VO2 max, strength diagnostics. So I then took that data to then build the plan. And it was so important, which I'll come to why in a second. Annoyingly, he actually turned up for the RMR test at about 6 espressos deep. So they couldn't
that
do
was the
RMR.
hardest thing about my test. You said you go in the morning, but it said no coffee.
Yeah.
Mine was only about 8 or 9 in the morning. I think I had a rough morning anyway, and no coffee. And I was like, get me to this place. So as soon as I got out of there, I was like, I need one.
Flat as a pancake, mate. He was about 6 deep. I said, Conor, just one thing. Don't let anything pass your lips before you go. Okay, no. Yeah, of course, Dan, of course. And then the guy calls me after. He goes, yeah, he had 6 espressos. So anyway, we kind of worked out his RMR based on our experience. But other than that, we got loads of data. So then what we did, using the Whoop, I didn't wear my Whoop throughout camp because Conor's Whoop was on my phone. So this was a key point. Yes, we use data, but we don't want the data to get in the athlete's head too much. again, going back to my point earlier, I'll take all that information. He just focuses on carrying out his day-to-day.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to get drawn into all of this. So every morning he'd ask me, Dan, how do I sleep? What was my kind of resting heart rate? Where's my HRV at? And I'll be honest, some days I told some white lies just for the greater good of the bigger picture. If he was in the red, I'd take that information on. I'd then do my other tests. So we do another test to monitor neuromuscular readiness, 3 jumps, CMJs, which is a very resistant to fatigue test. And if he was down by 12, 15% on his normative scores, that actually shows me, okay, he's probably pretty fatigued here. That then with the Whoop data and also subjective markers of how he's moving, how he's feeling, I then might pass that information over to Tony Sims and say, maybe we pull back a little bit today, going back to the push-pull method. Not every day is created equal. So that was really important. We used data. We then tracked all of his training expenditure. So he trained twice a day, pretty much every day, bar rest days. So for example, the morning run, he might burn 500 calories. The evening boxing session, he might burn 1,000 calories. So with his RMR, I won't give specifics, but let's say it's 1,800. 1,800 plus 1,500, how's your maths, Jack? So there's what, 3,300 or so calories.
That maths, mate.
So around about 3,300, let's say. There are other things like thermic effect of food, but we know that he's probably expending around 3,400, 3,500 calories. So that's out, yeah? So now, with Conor stepping up 2 weight classes, unless I had that information, I'm going in blind in terms of his nutrition strategy. So we're then building his nutrition strategy off the basis of his expenditure and then ensuring that he's either at worst in a maintenance or at best probably in a bit of a surplus so he doesn't crash his weight. And then as training loads increase and expenditure increases, i.e. his sparring goes from 8 rounds to 10 rounds to 12 rounds, there's obviously greater expenditure with the latter, then we have to formulate the nutrition strategy off the basis of that as well. So that's why the data was so important, plus lots of other reasons as well. We did his VO2 max at the start of camp. I won't say the numbers, but it was bloody impressive. So going into camp, I was letting him know and I was showing him the normative scores for an individual his age, showing him that he's up there with some triathletes in terms of his VO2 max, the maximum amount of oxygen one can produce, so which is the gold standard test of the cardiorespiratory system. So the base is there. So now we're just going to get better and better and better. So I'm trying to use the data to build confidence, but also use the data to inform the training decisions that we have throughout the course of camp. So that was a real key one. Another one was having synergy between all other team members. Dr. Fergus Connolly talks about this in his book, Game Changer. And he says having synergy between different departments with one sole goal and an athlete-centered model is fundamental to reach the performance goals that you're looking to reach. And that was key. It wasn't just, okay, you have a physio there, you have a head of performance there, you have a head coach in boxing there, you have an assistant there, you have a chef there, and no one's on the same page.
Yeah.
Everything was merged together. It had to be with one sole goal, and that was Conor. So that was really key, is getting everyone on side, letting everyone know the standards and what's expected. And we had a few moments, but you would 74 days in camp in Mallorca with a load of people. You're going to have the odd moment here and there, which is expected. It's high performance. It's not a linear path.
No, of course.
So the odd awkward conversation has to happen for the greater good of the journey. This wasn't about us. This was about Conor. We're there to facilitate Conor. So egos need to get pushed to one side for the greater good of the overall outcome-based goal.
For sure. A few things there. That what you're saying about that synergy, I've been listening to a few books recently. Steve Jobs, Walter Isaacson done an autobiography, and Elon Musk. And the same thing that you're talking about there, he done. Like, it used to be like software over here and hardware over here, but he merged them all together. So it's not like separate jobs that are going on. It's like everyone comes together for a common goal. So it's not all separate. So no one's fighting against each other. I love that. And earlier you mentioned about the environment, because I know full well, if you're in an environment where people have not got the same mentality, the same attitude, the same mindset, and even a seed of that or negativity can just spread completely. How important was that to keep that environment always, up?
So key. And sometimes I say, Jack's environment dictates outcomes. And this wasn't just an environment as Conor or as me or as someone else. We all had to raise our level for the greater good of the overall goal. We can't have passengers. We've got to raise everyone up to our level. So as Last Dance, Michael Jordan, what did he do to Scottie Pippen and co? Dragged them up to his level. His standards were so high, but he never asked someone to do something that he wasn't prepared to do himself. So actually, there's a nice piece actually in the Daily Mail with Conor's daily non-negotiables. So they came out, loads of media around this fight, and I got a whiteboard and I had daily non-negotiables for Conor. Very simple, You do it, we do it at our level, he does it at his level. You know, even daily non-negotiables at the highest level of pro sport can be carried out to reach a longer term goal. So there's the daily actions, and they're on a whiteboard. He executed them every day. What I also did to change the environment, I had, and I will say who now because I think they're okay with this, his sister, Pedro, the assistant boxing coach, and Glenn, the chef. They all lost between 8 and 11 kilograms throughout training camp. Nice. By buying into daily non-negotiables. I sat down, set them up with non-negotiables aligned towards their goal, and we had very high standards. We had an element of gamification around these non-negotiables, whereas every day we'd shout about what numbers we were on. We go for team walks because we were creating an environment that was conducive to success. In fact, I won't say who, someone bought some chocolate or sweets in the villa one day. Wow, that got shot down. Yeah, literally, sure. Conor was like a savage, and rightly so. That should not have been brought in the villa, but the person learned very, very quickly that can't be around this environment. So yeah, that's probably what I did. Is I try and see the best in everyone. I try and elevate all of those around me. But it takes the right type of people to want to make a change, and we had all of that. Everyone was there to make a change. Everyone knew that it was about Conor, yes, but what could they do that might not have been directly aligned to Conor, but what could they do in this environment so they show that they were progressing as well?
Do you think people think that because I call the non-negotiables sort of the boring work. Yeah. The boring work essentially brings results. Do you think a lot of people neglect that or don't put the importance on the boring work?
It's not sexy, right?
Yeah.
Daily non-negotiable. I've been speaking about them for years.
Yeah.
And it's not sexy to say, go and have 3 litres of water a day, try and sleep for 7 hours a night, have 2 grams per kilo of body weight of protein per day. For context, 180 kilo male, an 80 kilo male, that's 160 grams of protein, or maybe a little bit above. So training in some capacity, moving in some capacity, doing 10,000 steps a day. None of that is sexy. Now, we're talking high performance. Yeah. People are looking here for the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And there is no secret sauce.
No.
1% better every day yields a 37-time improvement over the course of a calendar year, as Sir Dave Brailsford spoke about, and James Clear most recently in Atomic Habits. That is what we have to focus on. And in this world of high performance, people are trying to overcomplicate it. Yes, we can go granular. Yes, we do go very deep with certain aspects around psychology, around goals and things. But if people are listening to this and they want one takeaway, is you can carry out 3 to 5 things on a daily basis. And if you do so, and don't give up after 4 weeks, don't give up after 8 weeks, but you do this for 6 or 12 months, you can see a profound change in your life.
Yeah. And I think it's not even just personally. I think that's business. I think that's anything. Like just the same shit every single day, and just refining and tweaking on them slight improvements every single day over the long run is what's going to bring back great results. But it is not sexy to, whether it's reading 10 books or thing you do, doing 10 steps or 10,000 steps or certain nutrition. All of these things are very, very, very boring. But just showing up on these things every single day is what's going to give you the results. So I remember back in the day when I used to do like fitness coaching and stuff or training coaching, it's like I'll give people a plan. It would be working and they're like, I want a new workout regime or I want a new diet. But we're like, no, this works. So you just stick to this thing for the next however long. Yes, there's going to be some adjustables. You can make it a bit more exciting, but people feel like they need to, something needs to change if they're paying or something. Yeah. Whereas I'm like, if you give me a plan and say, Jack, just stick to this thing here, it's going to work for the year, I'll just stick for the thing for the year. I won't think I'm wasting my money. He's not changed this. He's not done that. It'd be like, that's the fucking plan.
Yeah. You got to know where you're going.
Yeah.
As we spoke about. If you know where you're going and you trust the coach that you've signed up with, then trust the process. And like you said earlier, carry it out every single day. Trust the process. It might not be sexy, but know where you're going and know that this is getting you closer to that goal. Equally, if you're with the wrong coach, you've got the wrong plan and you feel like you're actually not getting closer to the goal, you're breaking down injured, then you have to address it. But I think showing up every day is vitally important, and showing up can be contextual to you as well. The thing about daily non-negotiables, and this is why I talk about them so much, is that everyone can do them. Whether you're Conor Ben at the highest level of pro sport, or whether you're John going down your local David Lloyd, you can all do non-negotiables. The key part is to start where you stand, identify where your feet are now and keep them simple. Don't overcomplicate them. You know, if you're doing 2,000 steps a day, don't set a target of 10,000 steps a day. 5,000 steps. Then you carry that out. Then maybe the next month you reflect on that and say, do you know what? I've done over 5,000 steps every single day. In fact, certain days I was doing 7 or 8. I think I'm ready for a new goal. Maybe now I'm going to bump that up to 8 or 10,000. So it's just getting really clear and specific with that, because going back to identity as well, and this is the key part, Jack, a lot of people join our programs and they failed in the past. They feel like they're going around in circles. They might show up to the gym, but they never really get any results. Well, when you set a goal and don't achieve it because the goal is too lofty and unattainable, what does that do to your identity? It then makes you feel like a failure. So we've got to set realistic goals, achieve that goal, reflect on it, review, and now plan for the next goal. Achieve that goal, go again. What does that then do for your identity? It completely changes who you are as a person, because you're now someone who sets a goal, puts a plan in place, does the work, shows up consistently, and most of all, achieves that goal.
Yeah, for sure. This is music to my ears, because when I talk to people, they come, they go, Jack, I've tried doing all these things, I can't do them. I said, let me know what you're doing off the bat. Well, I'm waiting. They don't do much. You want me to be like, I'm trying to plan, I'm trying to meditate, I'm trying to train, I'm trying to do my nutrition, I'm trying to do my steps, I'm trying to do that. I'm like, have you done any of these like current habits of yours? No, it's all new. Well, take a step back, because what you're doing, you're trying to do 10 things at once. You might uphold it for a couple of days, momentum drops off, you fall off it, then you think, I'm a failure, I can't do this. I'm like, just 1 or 2 habits at a time. Even if it's just like, you say, right, this quarter, I'm going to build 2 new habits. And then at the end of the year, you've built eight habits. Like, that's life-changing stuff. But I just don't think people look at what you're saying, the macro. It's always about, I need it now, I want to achieve now, I need to be what I'm seeing on social media, these people high performing doing all of these things. Because even when I coach some people, they're like, Jack, how do you get up at 4:30? How do you then study? How do you go to train? Do this. I'm like, mate, I've been working on myself for 6 years. So like,
it's a process.
Please don't look at what I'm doing to what you're doing at the stage that you are. Because trust me, when I started, I was trying to do it all and I was failing. I was looking at myself as a failure, but I scaled it back. I done one thing at a time, and then I eventually built them up. But that comes down with a lot of ups and downs and downs and downs.
It goes back to starting where you stand and identifying where your feet are,
yes,
not where John, Jack, Dave's feet are. And that's the problem, is people are in this comparison mindset with the power of social media now, which certainly has its blessings but also has its curses. Its comparison is the thief of joy. People just look, oh well, I want to do this, I want to do that. We see this most frequently in January. New Year's resolutions, new year, new me. This is my time to make a change. This is my year. And they'll go from 0 to hero too quickly. So liken this to a video game. You don't go from level 1 to level 10 right away. You complete level 1, then you go to level 2. You complete that, you go to level 3, so on and so forth. And your fitness performance journey, whatever you like to call it, should be no different. Start where you stand, start small, get clear with a longer term goal, absolutely. Reverse engineer, put the steps in place, do your daily non-negotiables, and be consistent and keep showing up. Don't do it for 4 weeks and then throw your toys out the pram saying, I'm not getting great results. Because you might be like that diamond analogy where you're chipping away. The diamonds are on the other side of there. And then you give up, and then you start again, and then you chase these other 10 things. That's the problem. We're living in a world where people want things instantaneously.
Novelty and excitement.
Exactly.
Really, really quickly. I've done it in the past myself, mate. So it's all lessons that I've took for myself. I love to, when you earlier you were talking about the training camp, and you said to Conor, we don't. There's no bad days. How was it for you, knowing this was such a big goal? There's a lot of. It was a massive event, is a massive build-up. It's everything. You're his right-hand man, taking him through that whole camp. Like, he's high-performing at a top-tier level. How was that for you, holding up that level of high performance and almost pressure to get him to that the best version of him?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I absolutely thrived off it. It reminded me, Jack, I've now done 15 years at the highest level of pro sport, and I've missed it to a degree. So I moved away from boxing about 12 months ago and have come to Dubai. We've got some great things going on business-wise over here. I'm taking the methods of pro sport and bringing them into a slightly different domain with business individuals. But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't missed it. And I went back in, and firstly, me and Conor get on really well. I know how to get Conor going. I really like him as a person, and I really love him as an athlete. He's an absolute savage, and he chases every marginal gain. We connect on a very deep level. And he's been very complimentary about me coming back in and, how that gets the best out of him. So from my end, the day-to-day was just enjoyable. I'd committed to a time, I'd committed to a process, and I'd made sacrifices. If you're asking for me specifically, I'd made sacrifices. You know, I've got a girlfriend here, I've got businesses here, and I had to be all in with Conor. That's the only option. You cannot dip your toes in. You've got to be all in towards that specific goal. And when I made that commitment, and there was a lot of thought going into, do I do this? Am I making the right decision here? I did a pros and cons list. I weighed it all up. And when I made the decision, there was no looking back. I'm in, and I'm all in, and I give absolutely everything every single day. Every margin matters, every detail matters, and we're there to win. That's how important this is. Like every day, everything from sleep, from training, nutrition, from mindset. Conor even started listening to Alan Stein Jr. Raise Your Game, because I knew I wanted him to get into the mindset thought process behind, you know, being a real high performer. He was reading the book, I think it's the Robert Greene, the however many powers. He was reading that, but each day we'd listen to Raise Your Game. We'd then have a conversation about it. And it's like those little details really matter. But that's what I live for. It's so good being in that immersive environment for me, Jack.
I love that. And I think it's a pleasure when you are working with someone that wants to, because I say the same thing. Even when I'm having a call with someone, they sign up and I just get them, it's like a level of commitment. How committed are you to being this person? Because I let them know I've worked with individuals that the ones that get the great stories, they have got these things. They're committed and invested to, they want it as much as I do. And the ones that don't, they're not that committed. And that's like, and I say to them, I can be an exceptional coach if I've got an exceptional client. I can be a great coach if I've got a great client. I can be a good coach if I've got a good client. Not because my attitude, but because if I'm willing to give you everything and you're not giving everything, we're not going to get where you want to go. And I think it's a pleasure when you get them people that are just like, just on that same path, so you can do the all in mentality. I love it. And the finer details, I know you've touched on the non-negotiables, right? What are some of them finer details, them little things that would probably go unnoticed for the normal individual that tip the scale? Because a lot of it is psychology, right? It's not just showing up and putting in the training work. A lot of it is around the way that someone's thought processes and the things that they're doing every single day. What are some of them finer details that take someone to that next level?
It's knowing your athlete first and foremost, and certain people in the room would say some things. I'd be like, he shouldn't have said that. That's going to get in his head.
I'm like that.
You know, talking about their, you know, this has had billions of hits on Instagram. It's like, don't say that just before a fight. You know, that's not the smartest thing to say. We prepare for every eventuality. We have such structure and such systems, but it has to be a malleable, movable system that, you know, if we are thrown a curveball, you've got to be able to react very quickly. You know, be like a chameleon, adapt to the environment, embrace the chaos is something as well. You know, walking out in front of 65,000 people for the first fight in England in, I think, 3 years for Conor, biggest fight of his life, steeped in British boxing history with the father's stories. That's a huge moment. In fact, we went the day before to the stadium to rehearse his ring walk. Again, another power move for us because the details matter. And you know, he had a bit of a moment then, and we reframed the next day, and you know, he was dialed in for the fight. But if he hadn't done that, you know, the ring walk on fight night, maybe that wouldn't have gone to plan. The other details, even on fight night, Jack, on the day we found out there were no mirrors in the changing room. So what do you mean there's no mirrors in the changing room? You better get some mirrors in the changing room. Conor doesn't know this. So myself and Lee, his lawyer, Lee managed to source some mirrors. We walked in, there were mirrors in there. People will probably be listening to this thinking, why the hell do mirrors matter? Well, they matter because for the last 12 weeks, twice a day, we've been drilling in front of a mirror. We've been doing all of his warm-up, all of his prep in front of a mirror. You remove that, that's a problem on fight night. We need this to be a very clear system. And the system that we've had throughout the course of fight camp needs to then be rolled and rinsed and repeated on fight night. These details matter. Who's in the change room? That matters. Energy is important. The BPM of the music, having his playlist aligned towards what we're looking to do, not bringing him up too early, vitally important. When is he having his ergogenic aids? When is he having his caffeine? Does he have it too early? Do we bring him up too early? No, everything is calculated. I even put on the wall "Man in the Arena" by Theodore Roosevelt, one of the best. Well, just incredible read if anyone has. I've done that before with John Ryder as well when he fought Canelo. It's not about everyone else. It's about you in this moment. You are the man in the arena. No one else matters. And I also got some rosary beads from a church in Mallorca. Like Conor grew up in Mallorca. It has deep intrinsic meaning to him. That's why we did the training camp on the island, for other reasons as well, to get away from London and the noise and distraction. Again, single-minded focus, one of my 3 key traits of a high performer. We were dialed in. No one bothered us. It was a great environment there in slightly warmer temperatures than the UK, which was nice as well. But I went to a church with Pedro. We bought some rosary beads, and that was on the walls. You had the Theodore Roosevelt, Man in the Arena, with the rosary beads. And just even Conor's warming up, he sees it there. It just brings him back, and gets his mind right. So it's just these details. Like some people won't get it, but the details at the highest level of pro sport really do matter. And one thing can throw an athlete off. So I think that's really important.
When did you realise that these little details were like as important as they are? Because all what you've just said there could be so overlooked by so many people or so many coaches. Just like that would not matter at all.
I think since I've been working as head of performance with Matchroom for the past 7.5 years, I think that for the past 5 or so years has really been a key focus of mine, is that I don't want anything to be thought out for the boxer to think of anything other than the fight.
Yeah.
And if their attention is slightly elsewhere, it takes them away from what we're trying to achieve. So there's just so many specifics that get brought into play. And
I feel like once someone's at such a high level, you're not looking for the macro changes. You are looking at these little tiny things that's going to alter the way that someone thinks or someone feels. Or even with the people that when I talk to and coach through people and they say they're a 10 out of 10 on their energy scale, or they're a 10 out of 10 productivity, they can't see what they need to do anymore. But I'm just looking for one little tiny thing that we could drop in that's going to enable them to take their performance to that next level, whatever that may be.
Yeah, and it's the little details as well. Like even in Conor's room, at the start of camp, he wasn't sleeping that well. And we were trying to identify why this was occurring. You know, I had his Whoop tracker on my phone, so he wasn't immersed in that. We removed his phone from his room. That was one of our non-negotiables. No phones after a certain time. Blue light exposure negatively impacts melatonin production. He then might be scrolling Instagram. He then gets in his head. His brain's going a million miles an hour. We want to be, if we're looking at the autonomic nervous system, we want to be in that rest and digest, parasympathetic state in that moment to optimize recovery, because Conor gives everything to every session. If his sleep is negatively impacted, that's going to be a problem unless we address it. So we try to create the optimal sleep environment. And it was actually something, what was it? I think we changed his pillow and we changed his blanket. Something as simple as that, which reminds me of the Sir Dave Brailsford aggregation of marginal gains rule, what he did with Team Sky, of changing the pillows, changing the bike seats, all these little things that, again, lots of people wouldn't think about. But that little thing, that if overlooked, then becomes a big thing, because then it impacts his sleep. We then have negative sleep for a couple of days. We know that heightens injury risk. He then throws a shot and, overextends. He then gets injured, could go back to us not changing his pillows and him not being able to sleep. It's those little details on a micro level that can then impact the macro.
I love it because I'm obsessed with all of these things. I love them. I'd love to ask you 2 more questions, Dan, before we wrap up today. Number 1, why do you do what you do? And I mean it as in, like, what's pushing you forward to be the best version of you? What's pushing you forward to take this constant progression of better? What's fueling you to get up every single day and just like, I need to show up as my best and do the best I can?
My biggest fear, Jack, is staying the same. I truly mean that. Nothing scares me more than being in the same position. So whether you're looking at Carol Dweck's research of growth versus fixed mindset, I want to grow and get better every single day. Whether that's conversations like this, Audible, reading books, going into meetings, having great conversations with my athletes and clients, whatever it looks like, growth is the driver for me. It's not about making X amount of money. It is linked to having a real impact on a global level. I won't go as granular today on that, but we've got some very clear goals as a business. We've got a new operations manager involved, and we want to have true impact on a global level. And I do believe that we can do that. I believe we have done that. I've done this nearly 20 years. We had an online business for around 11 years. So we have impacted people across the globe. But maybe not to the level that I'd want, and I feel like our methods can really have true impact to anyone, anywhere. So I think that's going to be something we're leaning into more. So I think, just having impact, growing, helping others, and letting people know that it doesn't have to be super challenging. There's so many people now jumping on this health and performance bandwagon, right, and trying to make money. And money's their driver. And this is problematic. Me living in Dubai, I see it every single day in my face. But whether you've done it for 6 months, whether you've done it for 20 years, it doesn't matter. As long as your intentions are pure and your values are pure and you want to provide value to individuals to get them to where they want to go, we have a system that can truly have impact on a global level. It really can. It's no BS, no clever marketing. It's not just me. Our team is world class, as you know. Like, we've got the people at the highest level of pro sport who've been there, done it, and continue to do it. And we've curated a system that enables normal people, everyday athletes, business people or other, who can get to their specific goals as well. So that's really something that drives me, is a quest to become better. I have curated the life that I want now, living in Dubai. I've been intentional behind that. I want to wake up with the sun, though it's blimmin' hot out there today. But anyway, that run was a bit toasty this morning. But joking aside, I'm curating the life that I want to enable me to bring my best self every single day, to enable me to grow, to enable me to then serve others on a global level.
Love that. And final question I'd love to ask is, what does becoming the best you mean to you?
It means everything, because going back to my biggest fear, which is staying the same, if I'm not becoming the best self or my best self, then that negatively impacts the energy that I bring to every conversation, every interaction. Like you said earlier, if you're signing up with a coach, you don't want a coach who's not actually applying those methods themselves, because what they say then doesn't have substance. The credibility is then lowered. I want to be known as someone who lives and breathes high performance. Throughout that training camp, I was struggling. I'll be honest, I was struggling. And Conor knows this, but I pushed through. He probably doesn't know to the level that I was struggling. 2 weeks before the Burj to Burj half marathon, I put my back out doing some filming with my branding guy. The most basic exercise, Jack, a double leg landing from a box, ridiculous. I get a couple of flare-ups, every year. I had spinal surgery, as you know, 12 years ago, and I manage it. But I was very vocal about me running this Burj to Burj half marathon on social media. And I'm someone who sets a goal, is part of my identity, and goes and achieves a goal. 6-7K in, I felt like someone was putting a knife through my leg. Many would have given up. And I had to go full David Goggins, though I don't fully agree with it. And I had to push. And to you, you're probably looking at this thing, mate, I've just done a 100-miler. But for me, that was my Everest, right? At that moment, start where you stand. And I had to dig deep. My knee was clicking, it was locking. I was thinking, this isn't going to be good. I've got a training camp with Conor Ben soon, but I've got to do this. And funny enough, with my goal setting and planning, I said that I wanted to do 1 hour 35. Do you know what I completed? 1 hour 35. I hit that goal, even though I literally had one leg for about 8K. So that was a bit of a win. The problem then was, that was micro thinking, which I never do. The macro was that I completely screwed myself at training camp. And I had to run with Conor. I had to lead from the front. I'm not getting any younger, but I do pride myself on that. But that was a real struggle. I was trying to do sprints with him, and my hips ended up completely out of alignment. Trying to find a decent practitioner in Mallorca was a struggle. We eventually did find one. Putting some needles in me about that long into my TFL wasn't pleasant, but we got there in the end. But that was a struggle. So going back to kind of my identity, what I believe in is just, I've got to push. So to become the best me, I've just got to keep pushing. I've got to keep getting better. Contextual to where I'm at, being mindful of my age now. So I have to manage my training loads, but I just want to get better every single day. And if I'm better, I can then give the same energy to everyone that wants to have a conversation and get better themselves.
Love that, man. Thank you, mate. It was a pleasure.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Loved it.